It's time for a market recap. Time to take a look at where we stand in the world of crypto, where we stand in the world of TradFi, take a look at BTC in a little bit more detail, and hopefully help you with the mindset of the way that the market is currently operating, or at least with the mindset of the strength of BTC. So the simplicity of the market right now for me is key. And that's not saying that the market is simple to trade. That's really looking at the way that we can use simplified signals in order to be able to adjust our thinking and the way that we are going to action and execute our trades then based on that simplified information. And what we have here on BTC is something that I think is, again, very simple in terms of the understanding and the thought process when it comes to where we're expecting price to go. Now, you'll see on here that obviously we're on the very bad look side of my line, not still on the anticipate upside. I've had this on here for a week or so just to kind of really exemplify the thought process of this simplification of the markets, which has been helping me a hell of a lot in 2025. And what we're saying on BTC here is that this is a very significant lower time frame structural breakout, along with the traditional markets doing something similar. BTC was actually a little bit stronger here, whereas other markets essentially traded down on the TradFi side to the equivalent of down here, sweeping this and then running aggressively into fresh highs. BTC was a little bit stronger in the holdup, but has now been weaker in terms of the response. And really, this level through here at 95.5, we didn't want to see lost. And you can see the importance of that really in the breakdown candle and in some of the lower time frame action that we got prior to that breakdown. The reason that we anticipate upside while we're trading above that level is just simply because that's a really good point for the market to be able to sustain and to hold. And especially as we traded down into that area on a weekend, that was another really good sign for the market that, you know, potentially this level was going to hold. Unfortunately, it did not. So we're now on this side of the line, which is kind of the very bad look side. And really what this is talking about is the shorter term price action, where we're going to trade in the shorter term. And I think that with this kind of look in mind, this still is the important level for us. So if BTC now trades into here, we would probably anticipate that this would now be a bearish retest of this former very strong resistance point, and therefore the likely outcome is still to the downside. But this would also make sense in terms of, you know, correction patch, relief patch, trading into this zone, and then potentially that being the knockdown and looking then back towards 91.5 down here as our target region for that run. And this would be equivalent to the TradFi move that we put in, with this consolidation here being attacked. And this is also typically something that we tend to see when we've got markets that have been, you know, moving quite aggressively. And I think with kind of the crypto reliance on the lower time frames and the inability to have that slightly zoomed out view, I think it's very easy to forget that BTC has actually been trading very positively for a good patch of time now. Pretty much since the start of April, BTC has actually been rallying and gaining significantly on the upside. And so this correction wouldn't be sort of, you know, the catastrophic end of BTC just because we get this move down to 91.5. It would still be absolutely in line with a correction based on what we've seen in terms of the upside. So if we're looking for something like this, I think it makes sense to target this zone down here. And like I was saying, in these very strong markets, when we get consolidations that go like this, these lows tend to be a very strong attacking signal. What we have here is, and this is really the classic logic for why this situation unfolds, we have very aggressive trending market, and we've had aggressive trending market from here. And because there's really no form of pullback, it's very hard to enter into this market. So if you are wanting to be a buyer, if you're wanting to trade into the upside, on a lot of these intervals, you're waiting for a pullback or a slowdown or a consolidation, and it doesn't happen. So we just rally and rally and rally. Then what the market is very, very good at is obviously making you push a button when it's at its kind of, you know, psychological extreme. And so when we start to get this consolidation is typically then when people will start to position, okay, because they can't position during this, we start to get pullbacks, we start to get corrections, people now start to position in this. Right? The price action is choppier, we get sweeps, we get movement to the downside, and this is where we tend to start positioning. And so therefore what happens then is the market runs this area because it knows that it had a lot of increased interest during these regions. It runs the lows here and then does this. And that's the ideal outcome for us, obviously, as we would like to see BTC trade into a low and then bounce back heavily and move into the upside. Now, if this retest that we're looking at and calling it a retest at this very early stage doesn't materialize as a retest and instead does this, I think we're in a very good position again to anticipate further upside, with a challenge of 100K probably being next on the cards from a psychological round number perspective. So I think that also sets up and again adds to this simplified outlook and view on BTC. And we can do that with one level, and we can base our thoughts and our thinking around there. We don't need to anticipate. We don't need to say, well, I think this is going to reject or I think this is going to reclaim. We can simply wait to see what the market will do around that level, and then we can position appropriately depending on the reaction that we see. And that's really the best situation that we can be in right now. We don't want to be anticipating this market. We don't necessarily need to. We can just wait and see from a lower time frame perspective what the market is going to do around a significant level, and then action and execute our trades on the back of that. And then what I wanted to speak to, and the alt side of things is like fine, like alts had a big move. A lot of alts have retraced their move. There's some alts that are holding up. Really, my market update on the alt side of things is going to be relatively boring, which is like do it yourself, because individually a lot of these markets are very good in order to be able to trade. But I don't think it's worthwhile me sitting here going through each of those markets when you have the ability to do that yourself, to pick out some of the ones that interest you, whether or not it's narrative based, whether or not it's kind of social based and what you've seen discussion on. We know that things like Altcoin, and we also know that Pengu have been very, very strong. And so again, they make two markets that make sense to be interested in from a continuation to the upside perspective. But everything else is really just going to be kind of liable to increase volatility based on what BTC is doing. BTC corrects 3%, alts are down 15%. It's that classic environment that we're faced with again. So what I want to actually spend the rest of the time doing on this video is discussing kind of bullish and bearish outcomes on a higher time frame perspective for BTC and also for the TradFi markets. And I'm going to be, I guess you not really kind of, trying to get both sides correct or pitching for both outcomes. What I want to do is just present the information as I see it. And of course, as there should be in analysis, there is an outcome in which I see a bullish price move, and there is an outcome in which I see a bearish price move. And I can tell you right now up front, before I do any of those, I still see the bullish outcome as the more likely. Okay, so if you want me to kind of be forced into giving you my bias and giving you which side I think is correct, I think that the upside argument is stronger, but I will present both of them to you now. So first thing I want to do through here is just take a look at the higher time frame on BTC. And again, when we're lost in the weeds down on the lower time frame, it's very easy to forget what's been occurring on the higher time frame. And BTC managed a very important higher time frame reclaim with this 92,000 level that was reclaimed. We had the 3-day close, which was here back at the end of April. And we have sustained above that level at the moment. We also know that if we move down to that 91, it's going to be a retest of this zone. And we've seen previously that this area here has been a heavy buy zone on the higher time frame. And so again, we would like to see it act in the same way. Give us that nice sweep of these levels here, move down to this low, and then recover and hold this level and push to the upside. From an RSI perspective, we're actually set up really, really well. So we can see here that we're back above the 50 level. The AO was cross positive after diverging down at the lows, and we're in a really positive position here for trend continuation. And I think things only really strengthen and improve when you look at the higher time frame. When you look at the weekly, the view is largely the same. We're into this zone here, and again, the weekly reclaim of this region, very little price action that's trading back below 93.5, which you can shift the line up and draw as your weekly level. And again, on the RSI, we're bouncing and moving away from that 50 zone. And also, probably importantly, is we've got a little level in here on RSI, and this doesn't mean too much, I guess, aside from the fact that historically and over the last 2 years, this is since 2023, we have always bounced significantly and put in a low when the RSI is hit just below this 50 level. Okay, so whenever we've got down to this zone, we've typically had a weak AO crossover, a weak AO crossover, weak AO crossover, and then rally again back to the upside. So this weekly chart would absolutely set you up into belief that BTC all-time highs could be on the cards and probably are for the summer if this was to play out in a kind of, aggressive trend continuation manner. So higher timeframes, I think, look really, really solid here from a weekly perspective, given the reclaims that we've got of the level, and therefore kind of set you up into why I believe that the bullish argument is very strong here, and that the lower time frame should be considered in isolation for the correction versus it being the end of this higher time frame recovery that we've been seeing. So I think that's a really important kind of point here for BTC. And once you go to the monthly and the quarterly, I mean, like, this shit still looks absolutely fantastic through here. So the higher you go up the time frames, I think the better the chart looks. It's just that lower time frame area that we would be concerned about now. If we can't reclaim this 95, then I think the 91.5 is on the cards, but then higher. And really, the bearish argument, and why I consider it the weaker argument, despite there still being one, is because it's based in the traditional markets. So actually, the bearish argument here is actually based largely on TradFi markets. And so what we've got through here, and I can once again just simplify this for us as we're looking, is we're starting to see lower time frames slow down on SPX through here. Right, and we can see it both on the RSI, and this is that correction that we were speaking about at the start of the video here, where we swept the consolidation again, very similar in terms of the structure on BTC. And really, these highs that we've been making here haven't been doing a huge amount in terms of like getting that momentum to push away. Right, we would really need to see something that would accelerate through here, okay, in order to buck what's happening here. And you can see that each of these highs on the Ostium oscillator, it's saying there's something not right about them, right? So there is an opportunity here potentially for the correction. Now, whether or not that would be a BTC style correction, we come down here, or whether or not that would be a kind of a higher time frame pullback, we will see. So again, unfortunately, two outcomes that I'm giving you. It's a potential to blow through this, or it's a potential that this will be a corrective region for TradFi markets. Now, the unfortunate thing about TradFi markets is that they're not actually as strong as BTC from a higher time frame perspective, which is where the bearish argument and bearish concern comes into this. So if I do flick to the 3-day here, you'll notice that this is one of the classic downtrending problem regions when we get back up to this reset point on RSI. So we're back right up to this 50 level. We've done the push here. Okay, we're back to this 50 level. This is like a trend reset button, and this has now the potential to be that recovery. We're moving up actually into a sticky area for SPX as well. 5650 has been a trouble zone on the higher time frames. Once again, this would be an area that it wouldn't surprise me should this mark a kind of a top region and us to trade lower from here. And the other thing that I just want to draw a reference to is the fact that we have seen this on multiple occasions before as well. So we see this area here on SPX. We get a nasty correction here of 15%. We get a rally up this side of 13%. Okay, just into another sell-off, right? Into another sell-off of 21%, into another huge rally here of 20%, right? And then back down again for another 20% sell-off. So during this patch here in 21-22 is where we see this back and forth price action. The market rallies very aggressively on the traditional side of things, as it does in crypto. It does not mean that it has put in a bottom. And sometimes these periods of price action can, trick people into believing that there is now a bottom that has been formed when it isn't. And we're just waiting for that trend continuation. So we now have the 3-day, which is trading up at the 50 level. And we also have the weekly, which is trading up at the 50 level. So again, this rally that we've seen, it's a very good rally. It's a very strong rally. I still think it would make sense if it had bottomed here, especially again, if we start looking at like the weekly and where that's tapped into and the areas it's taken out and the areas it's managed to tap into. I think there's a very good, argument to say this is still going to be a bottom region, or at least a bottoming region. But this is still a concern from a trend perspective. This can absolutely just be a bounce, correction, return to average, and now attack the downside again. I think it's a far weaker argument, okay, but it does exist. So BTC doesn't really have that side of things. BTC has been actually quite resilient. It's only suffered 31% downside. Some major stocks have suffered significantly more downside. Apple is down more than BTC was. Nvidia is down more than BTC was. Tesla is nearly double the amount down than BTC was. And BTC is only 15% away from its all-time high. So BTC is actually in a very strong position, both from the technical side of things and obviously when we start to look at the actual numbers behind the correction, the numbers to all-time high, it's actually in a really good spot. And so hopefully through this video, I've just managed to give you kind of a broader picture, which is really the aim of this. It's not necessarily to dive into lots of shitcoin tickers and start going through all of those. It's really to give you an awareness of where I see the thought process from a lower time frame perspective on BTC, which is we might be in a correction zone if we can't recover this important level at 95.5. I still think the higher time frame is set up incredibly well for BTC, and I still think there is a very, very good shot we're trading at all-time highs by summer. But there is still the grey cloud hanging above, which is the traditional markets and what the traditional markets decide to do from here. From a BTC perspective, though, honestly, would not surprise me to see that all-time high surpassed closer, nearer than people think.